Oscars are the most prestigious awards in all of movies, possibly film and cinema altogether. But the highest award one can achieve in the Oscars is the Best Picture. This is the best movie altogether that has come out within that film season. So what is the history of these Best Pictures? What did they look like before, and what are they now? In this series, I'm going to take us through each decade of the Oscars and analyze and look at each Best Picture winner and see what kind of trends we can notice, see what things have stood the test of time from all the way from the 20s to the 20s again today, 100 years of Oscars, and seeing what does it take to be a Best Picture winner. So in this series, each video is going to be a different decade of the Oscars, starting off with the very first in the 1920s. Now, the Oscars themselves are presented by the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts, and Science. And this academy was established in 1927. It was established with the goal of uniting all professions in film: directors, actors, writers, producers, and even technicians. Anything that goes into a movie was meant to be represented with this academy. It was founded by Louis B. Mayer, who founded a production company and named it after himself. And when it comes to the Academy, he is quoted as saying, "I found that the best way to handle filmmakers was to hang medals all over them. If I got them cups and awards, they'd kill them to produce what I wanted. That's why the Academy Award was created." That's a really weird sentence, in all honesty. Seems kind of controlling almost, in a way, of just trying to get the films he wanted made. And just basically saying filmmakers would do whatever he asked if he just dances some shiny stuff in front of their face. Oof. That line, and naming a company after himself, screams that he might be just a little egotistical. But we move on to the first Oscars. Now, the first ever award ceremony was held May 16th, 1929, for the film season from August 1st, 1927 to July 31st, 1928. It was hosted by Douglas Fairbank, the Academy president at the time, and this is the only Oscars to not be televised or broadcasted via radio. It really was just a small closed-off ceremony held in Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel in LA. It just meant really just for the filmmakers themselves and not some outside audience, which would very quickly and drastically change. 270 people attended the 15-minute ceremony. The recent Oscars was over 3.5 hours, with 18.7 million people tuning in. From 270 viewing this award ceremony to over 18 million is insane. Sorry, for the recent Oscars ceremony itself, I didn't see an exact number, but the theater that the Oscars was held in seats about 3,400 people, so it's probably the number of attendees that were there. Tickets for this first Oscars were $5, which is worth about $89.38. This was the price of standing room tickets in a Cowboys versus Jet games at the time of writing this. And I've been to AT&T Stadium. I've been in those standing rooms watching a Cowboys game. It's not worth it. You're just looking at the Jumbotron. You can't really see the field too well, so you're just watching a screen, forced to stand up. Not fucking worth it. I'm pretty sure at the Oscars, these people were fed as well. That was included in the price, I think. So I know which one I would rather have gone to. Now, interesting note about this Oscars. What would be known as Best Picture was first called the Outstanding Picture Award. And it had a similar category this same year, the Best Unique and Artistic Picture, which would later be dropped, making Outstanding Picture the event's highest honor. And through the name changes, Best Picture and Outstanding Picture are still the same category. It just has overgone name changes, and it is not a new category altogether. Also, interestingly enough, winners were announced about 3 months before the ceremony was held, which is just very interesting. I don't know if losers of these categories even went. I don't know how the nominations even truly worked at this time. There's not as much information for this year and some of these earlier years as there are today. Also, I struggle to understand why you would even want to go. I guess to mingle, to socialize, and to network within the industry could be the only reason I could think of, because with the winners announced, why go? Also, if you were a loser, why go? An interesting thing to note this year that there were 2 honorary awards given out. One to the Warner Brothers, and then more interestingly, in my opinion, Charlie Chaplin was given an honorary award, since he was being considered for Best Actor, Best Director, and Best Writing for Comedy, all for the same movie called The Circus. And before we get into Best Picture, which again at this time is known as Outstanding Picture, let's take a look at some of the other categories and the winners of this year. We have Best Unique and Artistic Picture, which was Sunrise. Best Directing for a Comedy was Louis Milestone for 2 Arabian Nights. Best Directing for Dramatic Movie was Frank Borzage for Seventh Heaven. Best Actor was Emil Jannings in The Last Command and The Way of All Flesh. Best Actress was Janet Gaynor in Seventh Heaven, Street Angel, and Sunrise. The Oscars seemingly awarded for actors and actresses for their roles during the whole film season, not one specific movie like they do nowadays. Also, I'm assuming at this time it was easier for actors to be in multiple films in one film season, because I think the film industry wasn't what it is today. Movies were just made in a quicker amount of time with less production behind it, less money behind it compared to today. Because we'll get into how much this first Best Picture winner costed. Best Writing for an Original Story was Underworld by Ben Hecht. Best Writing for an Adaptation was Seventh Heaven, once again, by Benjamin Glazer. Best Art Direction was The Dove and Tempest, both by William Cameron Menzies. I guess same person, multiple movies during a film season applies for more categories than just actors and actresses. The Best Cinematography was Sunrise by Charles Rocher and Carl Struess. Best Engineering Effects was Wings by Roy Pomeroy. And then Best Writing, specifically title writing, was Joseph Franham. It said for no specific film. I guess he probably worked on multiple films during this time. And when it says title writing, I'm very curious if it was just like those intro title screens, or if it's also factoring in like during silent movies during this time where they have text, those text screens just showing what the people are saying, if that is title writing. Just the movie titles themselves, I could probably find out. I tried to look into it further. I can't find anything. I'm not going to spend my life looking for title writing definitions, so we're just going to move on to the movie that everyone has been waiting for. Outstanding Picture, which was won by the 1927 film Wings. Not Seventh Heaven, which had won so many awards during this first ever Academy Awards. But now, let's get into Wings and see if this movie is truly worthy of being the first ever Best Picture winner. Again, it's called Outstanding Picture at the time. But let's go back and see what this movie was about. So, Wings is a silent film and is the only silent film to ever win Best Picture. This is about the time where films were really transitioning from being silent films to talkies. So this is the only one to have ever won it. This is a movie that takes place during World War I. That's the backdrop for the entire movie. So, 2 small-town boys join the war. Jack, like the kind of everyday man, friends with the girl next door, and then David, the local rich boy. But he seems much more shy and introverted. Doesn't really seem to have none of the real negative stereotypes we usually associate with the rich kid in movies and other media. And they both love the same girl back home. She's just a woman who had been in a big city. That's literally what the movie says she has over the other girls, that she had been to a big city. But this girl loves David and not Jack. But Jack thinks that she is in love with him. And when he talks to her before he leaves to go off to war, he sees a picture that she meant to give to David, and Jack thinks it's for him, and he takes it, which David sees and is heartbroken. But this girl tells David that her heart is with him. Then there's the girl next door character who is in love with Jack, but Jack doesn't seem to really notice her name being Mary. So then David and Jack go to basic or boot camp. I don't know what it was called for them. And then Mary goes off and joins the Red Cross or some Red Cross equivalent and is kind of in the front lines helping with medical attention. And we see Jack bringing the picture of the girl back home, her name being Sylvia, for good luck. And David bringing a bear from his childhood that his mother had kept. Because his mother had talked about how she had this when he was a boy, and now he's a man going off to war. And I think Jack takes it to symbolize that that boy that his mother loved is still there. And Jack is going to do his best to bring that boy back home. And Jack and David kind of start off as rivals in boot camp. Mostly Jack just being a dick to David with the most egregious stomping on his hat during push-ups or jumping jacks or whatever they were doing. But through boot camp and their sparring match where Jack just beats the shit out of David, they just become best friends because of that. And they go on air missions together, earning medals for their work together. After this huge successful attack and earning their medals, Jack and David go to Paris and party, with Jack getting incredibly hammered and mesmerized by bubbles. With the bubble inclusion being what special effects at the time were capable of. And the opening shot of this scene in this bar is an incredibly famous shot with this, where they pan through with this camera attached to the ceiling as they pan through over all of these tables that lead us to Jack, drunk. They all did that in one shot. Mary is also at this party and sees Jack, who is super drunk, and Jack's getting flirty with this other random woman. So Mary attempts to get Jack to go after him, but he is so drunk. He doesn't even recognize her, just kind of sees this blurry person wearing a uniform. Mary cries and then goes to the bathroom and is told by the restroom worker that if she wants to win a man over, essentially that she needs to slut it up. And she puts on what is probably a classy dress by today's standards, but pretty sure it was risque for the time. She's showing a little leg. Ooh la la. So Mary steals Jack from this other woman because her sparkling dress looks like a bunch of bubbles to Jack. And like I said, this dude is off of his ass. And these women are trying to get him to go to a room with them alone. There's some stuff in here that has not aged well. Jack is pretty much probably getting taken advantage of because he's drunk. Mary having to slut it up for a man's attention. I don't think people would like that nowadays. A lot of stuff going on here. But we're not at the most egregious example of something aging poorly. As they go to the hotel room and Jack just passes out, and Mary starts to change back into her uniform when two military police barge into the room, and one just creeps on Mary to an uncomfortable level. And pretty much says that Mary doing this, whatever she has done with this serviceman, is not allowed, and he gets her fired. After creeping on her topless, making some weird remarks to her, he gets her fired as well. And she's sent back to America. This was a scene that's like, sometimes we see stuff and people are like, oh, that wouldn't fly nowadays, but it probably would. Or it's like it's on the line, or people are like, oh, this is the good old days and it's just something that shouldn't be allowed. This is an example of something disgusting that is not okay, that I guess for the time was completely fine. Really weird to see. But David and Jack are then sent back to the front lines for a final push against Germany. Somebody reads on a paper at the military base that they're at that Mary was fired, and this guy makes fun of her, which incredibly angers Jack, and he defends her, causing David to inquire if Jack loves Mary, but Jack insists that no, he loves Sylvia. We see David get a letter from Sylvia, and Sylvia says that Jack believes she's in love with him, but she is still, in fact, in love with David. Then Jack shows off his picture of Sylvia to David, but he accidentally drops it, and it falls out of its case, and David sees the picture with his name on the back of it, showing that this picture was, in fact, for him. So David, trying to save Jack's heart before they go out on this big, important mission, David grabs the picture and tries to put it back in Jack's case for him, but Jack isn't letting him do it. Jack wants the picture back. So David takes the picture and tears it up in front of Jack to stop him from seeing it. And this causes their friendship to pretty much just dissipate. It is demolished from this. Jack is incredibly pissed off at David. Sorry, they go off into battle with Jack just being incredibly angry at David, and David feeling bad. But he thinks he probably has done the right thing to keep Jack's mind more clear for the fight. Then, while out in combat, David is shot down, lives the crash, is then surrounded by Germans. So he falls into this lake as they all shoot him, and he still lives and runs away. Back at the military base, Jack and the rest of the U.S. men believe David is killed, which causes Jack to feel an immense guilt, and he becomes incredibly angry with the Germans, vowing to down as many Germans as possible in honor of David. So the U.S. then goes on this last final push against the Germans, with Jack raging a absolute warpath. We then cut to David stealing a German plane, and he attempts to make it back to the American side. And then Jack sees the German plane. David does his best to yell through the sky to Jack to get his attention so Jack can realize it's him. But, predictably, he doesn't. Jack shoots down David's plane. Then Jack lands his plane to ensure his kill, and he takes a piece of the German plane as a souvenir. Then he realizes he had shot down his friend, who is not dead yet, but is in the process of doing so. They have a friendly kiss, and David dies. Jack goes back home, is celebrated as a hero, but then Jack ends up going to David's parents' house, gives them his medal and the bear to his mother, and Jack breaks down in David's mom's lap as she says she wanted to hate him, but she just can't. The movie then ends with Jack getting together with Mary. I'm not gonna lie, I really did feel that death of David. I'll get more into it later, but this movie hit. It's a very long movie. I think it's like almost 3 hours or something. There's a lot of fluff in there, but once it starts getting going, I mean, you start to get captivated by it, and it really does hit. So let's just dive into some of the three main characters here in this movie, the cast of them. We have Jack, who is played by Charles Buddy Roger, very famous actor at this time period. This man was dubbed America's Boyfriend, and later married Mary Pickford. Keep her in mind for a later part in this video. And then David was played by Richard Arlen, who served as a Canadian pilot in World War I, and was a U.S. Army Air Force flight instructor during World War II. So this man really played his character off of memory and continued to serve in an incredible way. Absolute great man, Richard Arlen. Mary was played by Clara Bow, nicknamed the It Girl. She only acted for 4 more years after Wings and later became a rancher. So she said, hey, I'm in the first Best Picture winner of all time. My place in history has been set. Let me go ranch a little bit. But now let's talk a little bit more in depth about the movie in a more special place. Okay, guys. So I'm actually at Kelly Field. This is the area where Wings, the 1927 movie, was originally filmed. Now, I don't know where exactly. This is a pretty big area, so I have no idea anywhere exactly. I drove around here, and I didn't expect there to be, but there wasn't anything commemorative of the 1927 film here. The first ever Best Picture winner. But, yeah, I mean, there's still, because it's still being used a lot. There's a huge Boeing presence around here. I thought it'd be cool to come over here where the movie was actually filmed and talk about it, give my final thoughts and some superlatives out about this film. But yeah, this is it. Not much has changed. I mean, funnily enough, so much has changed, yet nothing has changed because this is still just an airfield being used. But obviously the tech and the buildings surrounding it are completely different from back then. Times have changed, but the use of this place is still the same. I was hoping for maybe one small outlet museum, something small, but there's absolutely nothing out here about this movie, which is, to be expected because it's still being used, but still wouldn't have been surprised if there was something given the fact that it was the first ever Best Picture winner, but yeah, here we are. Okay, if you couldn't tell from the camera work, in that first one. So I was able to just drive here, so I think I am able to be here, but it just this is a place of like business. Like people are doing their like there's like people doing jobs out here. This is not like just some place to come and chill. So it does feel I do feel very out of place and like I could get in trouble, even though like I said, there's no security. I just was able to show up here, so I can't imagine that I legally can't be here, but it just feels very off. That's why the camera work in that last shot was really bad and why I'm in my car right now. But I'm still going to do the video, the rest, this segment of the video here in Kelly Field. Um, I'll try to show more off because you can just kind of see the planes behind me and the field behind me, which is all you needed to see. There's nothing else going on in that shot, but I just want to give some context of why that camera work was the way it was. But there's this huge ass um, plane over here, and there is like a plaque in front of it, so I'd have to imagine I can go over there and check it out. So I will, and that's where I'll do these last little thoughts about Wings, the movie. So while the love triangle World War One setting and enemies to best friend storyline is an extremely basic one, I did find myself to be very much invested and connected into this storyline. It was very simple but executed very well. So at the end of the day, it's nothing I haven't seen before, but I did still find myself enjoying it. David in this movie was a great character. The actor did a very good job at portraying his kind of shy and timidness. David surviving everything that he did just to die in the manner that he did, pretty much at the hands of his own best friend, was something that I was truly heartbroken by. Um, and it definitely put this movie over the top to being a genuinely good movie. Was honestly the character of David himself going through everything that he did and feeling attached to him just to see him perish in God, one of the worst ways I think I've ever seen in a film. Not by brutality of the death, but by the emotions behind it coming at the hands of his own best friend. I thought the visuals in this movie were absolutely good. Like I thought these were actually really good visuals, and I was trying to think of how they managed to do it. The first one I'll talk about is because it's the more minor one, is the party shot where they pan through all of these tables to then focus on Jack. And how they did it was they had this ceiling rig that they rigged up to the ceiling that went over literally over the tables, and the characters, all the actors had to back up, and then it would reveal Jack at the table. That is actually a very famous shot. We've even seen it in Star Wars, of all places, recreated, but it is a very iconic shot that was done very well. And speaking of shots, this one's not done too well. I don't think I'm too visual right now, my face, but it's fine. But the most stunning part of the visuals were the aerial shots, the dogfight shots up in the air, and they accomplished this by attaching camera rigs to these airplanes. These shots were actually done on top of real airplanes in the actual sky, with the pilots being the actors having to fly them around. This was insane. It created the cockpit shot that we know today, popularized this shot that now we see absolutely everywhere where there's aircrafts being flown. It was an amazing piece of innovation that helped propel this movie to becoming an Oscar winner. And all the actors had to fly the plane, so every actor had to know how to fly a plane. And they all did, with the exception of Buddy Rogers, who had to learn how to fly just for this movie. And he actually found out he had motion sickness and was throwing up in between takes just to go right back up in the air and do it again. Extreme dedication from him, and it paid off because this really was a good movie, and the realism of those shots is what sells it. So him pushing through to do that really worked and helped this movie out. One of the more famous things from this movie was that they needed clouds to shoot. So if it was a clear sky, they had to halt production, and this caused this movie to be the most expensive movie at the time. I think it was I can't remember the numbers. I forgot to write down the numbers.
It was roughly $2 million at the time of shooting in 1927, which is about $33 million today, give or take a little bit.
And this also, those numbers pretty much just show that the film industry, even back then, it's not a proportional thing. It was a much smaller industry than it is today, because that being the most expensive movie at the time back then is nothing. Even if you convert the money to today's money, it is absolutely nothing like the major movies and even some minor movies, the type of budget that they have to produce those movies. And this movie was pushing technical boundaries on that type of budget. Very impressive. Um,
And actually, an interesting thing, Wings has actually entered the public domain this year. I do with that information what you will. I don't know what you would do with it, but just letting you know. And then I also do want to give out some superlatives to the movie Wings, starting with best character. I've mentioned him earlier. He's the only character I've really mentioned on his own, and that is David. Um, Probably, I mean, he felt more down to earth than the others. Jack, there was something off about him that I didn't quite like. Just seemed too, I don't know, like it's a weird thing to describe just the way he was approaching women in the movie, which is a weird thing to say, but um, it just seemed like he wanted the status of being with the most popular girl in town. And even though his heart was with a different woman, just because she was the girl next door, he didn't seem to notice her. I didn't quite connect with him in that way. But David, being the emotional centerpiece of this movie, the send off with his mom being very heartfelt, and then his own death in this movie, kind of bringing me to tears a little bit. I definitely have to go with David as the best character. Now, for worst character, it's easily the military police guy who walked in on Mary? Carrie? What the fuck is her name? I forgot. Walking in on Clara Bow's character, just absolutely creeping on her in a very disgusting manner. That just uh, that did not age well at all. Now, my favorite moment in this entire movie was definitely Jack and David's goodbye. The resolution to the breaking of their friendship was this heartfelt goodbye as David ends up passing away um, accidentally because of Jack. Jack shooting his plane down, Jack not knowing, David forgiving him, letting him know it's not his fault, and just this heartfelt send off. Honorable mention is when Jack goes and talks to David's mother. Same kind of sentiment of forgiveness, even though she wanted to hate him, but she just can't. But that's a pretty close one. But ultimately, Jack and David's goodbye is probably my pick for my favorite moment. Now, was this movie Oscar worthy? Gonna have to go with yes. I mean, the Oscars were meant to celebrate all facets of filmmaking and the technological advancements and innovations that this movie did, like no other movie really before or even since Top Gun Maverick being the only thing to really do this since. Yeah, this is definitely an Oscar worthy movie. But now I'm gonna head back home. I don't feel like I belong here.
All right, and now we're back here. Okay, obviously I haven't actually left yet to go over there, but hey, that's pretty cool that I'm conveniently in the perfect place to do this. But now let's go ahead and just check out some of the Letterboxd reviews for the movie Wings. See if other people think that this Best Picture was deserved. The first review we have here is from Paige, who gave it 2.5 stars. They said it was way too long. It didn't really ever make up its mind whether it was a comedy, a romance, a serious war drama, etc. 1 extra half star for its effects, which I imagine were spectacular for the time. We went into it. The effects were great. I think they still kind of hold up today. I mean, they're genuinely in the air. They're actually flying these planes, so I think those effects really do hold up today. Way too long is definitely a really good complaint about this movie. It is extremely long. I was definitely spacing out during the middle of this movie. Got drawn back into it. The mixing up of tones, I think that's fine. I don't really see that as a negative. Life consists of all these different tones, and it was just meant to depict life during that time, during that war. So having all these different elements to it, I don't see as a negative. Next up, we have Lisa's 4-star review saying it was a masterpiece, just a really long masterpiece. She said she also expected more Clara Bow as well. And I don't know who the fuck she's talking about when she says, is nobody going to talk about that guy that looked like Gordon Ramsay? Oh, maybe if I'm editing up this video and I find who she's talking about, I'll put him up right here. But we'll see. But yeah, this is probably my stance as well. It's a masterpiece, just extremely long, overly so. I had no expectations of any of the actors' appearances in this, how their length. But let's move on to the next one. We have Cinema Joe give it 3.5 stars. That said Top Gun Maverick was better. This is just a funny one. This is just a little trolly troll. Haven't seen Top Gun Maverick, but I guess I should because I think I've heard that the top 3 depictions of flying in movies is Wings, and then just the 2 Top Gun movies. So we move on to a 4.5-star review from Bree. It's a masterpiece. I don't really know what else to say. The dogfight at the end, I don't want to spoil it, is one of the most emotionally fraught, stressful scenes I've ever seen. She's referring to the Jack David fight, which is one-sided, as one is trying to kill the other, and the other one is doing their best to survive. That was extremely stressful. I mean, I think everyone knew where it was headed, but man, did I not want it to head there. Like I said, David was my favorite character. To see him go like that after everything he had been through did hurt. She said this has the most incredible cinematography and action sequence, and this runtime just breezes by. Genuinely a masterpiece. Okay, cinematography, action sequence, yes. The runtime does not breeze by. The second half of this movie breezes by because that's when you're actually invested into it, but the first half, especially the middle part of this whole movie, not as much. Here we go. We have the final review, 2 stars. So I'm just going to say this movie hits a particular trifecta of things I really do not enjoy. Silent movie, war movie, and movies that are longer than 2 hours. Why did you watch this movie? Just to say you did? It's like, Obviously, you see the runtime when you start up a movie, because he did not watch this in theaters. I'll tell you that much. I know he knew how long it was when he pressed play. He still continued to do it. It's obviously a silent film and a war movie based on all the pictures you see of it. I don't know what he thought he was getting into. I don't know why he watched it if he hates these 3 things. But now, that's Wings. There's only one other Best Picture winner in this decade. And let's go take a look at it now. All right, so now to the second ever Oscars, which was held on April 3rd, 1930. But the reason I'm including this in the 1920s video is because this was for the films August 1st, 1928 to July 31st, 1929. So the films that are covered were from the 20s. That's why I'm still including this one. This was held in Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles and broadcasted via radio this time. This one is actually finally out for the public to all listen to. It was hosted by William C. DeMille? I don't know. A famous writer and director from the silent film era who specialized in adapting Broadway plays to silent films. Why would you do that? Broadway's all about music and the sound of it. Why? I get that there's still music playing during silent films, but I don't know. That one just doesn't make quite as much sense to me. This time, the winners were not announced in advance this time, so it was actually an actual event that made sense to go to this time. The categories were condensed from 12 to 7. I think the biggest thing that they did was there were different categories for writing of this file, like writing in comedy, writing in dramatic, writing adaptation, writing original. I think they all kind of condensed it down to just best writing and then best directing. Instead of best directing in this, directing in that, they just made it, hey, best at this, period. Who was the best? There were no official nominees this year, but some research by the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Science themselves have resulted in unofficial and de facto nominees. And then on a controversial little note, one woman, Mary Pickford, I told her to remember her, a founding member of AMPAS, lobbied to win Best Actress by inviting voters over to her house for tea. Icky, 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 I don't like that. Let the merit of your work speak, not your tongue speak to these other people, and I'm just going to hope that it was just tongue speak. This is the only year where no film won more than one Oscar, including the Best Picture this year. Very interesting. I don't know if that was a conscious decision they went going in, of, hey, each category, let's have a different winner so we can celebrate a greater magnitude of films, or if somehow truly, it just happened that way. But we have the Best Director this year was Frank Lloyd for The Divine Lady. The Best Actor was Warner Baxter for In Old Arizona as the Cisco Kid. The best actress was Mary Pickford. In Coquette, I don't know how you say that, as Norma Besant. I don't like that. The best writing was The Patriot by Hans Crayley. The best art direction was The Bridge of San Luis Rey by Cedric Gibbons. And the best cinematography was White Shadows in the South Seas by Clyde DeVina. Also, you'll see that there's not multiple movies credited for the winners of these categories. I think that maybe from this point going on, they only did it for one movie. One movie was your entry and not the accumulation of all your work during that film season. But now, what we're here for. The best picture, still called Outstanding Picture at the time, was The Broadway Melody. Now, I'm going to be honest. I got kind of bored while watching this movie, so I'm going to be less thorough with the story than I was with Wings. It's also a shorter movie, so there is less to talk about. And it's also probably worth noting that I watched one movie twice that thinking it was a Broadway Melody, but it wasn't. I did that because I went on YouTube to try and find it. I got a little tricked, which I was thankful for because that movie was really bad. I was like, how did we go from Wings to this? But then it turned out Broadway Melody, in all honesty, was not much better. So let's get into it. Okay, so this is the first Best Picture with sound. I mean, Wings had music, but this is the first time we can actually hear the actors speak. It's about two sisters, Hank, the older sister, and Queenie, the younger sister. They're a sister duo, a musical show or group, or whatever you call it. And they try to get into a performing group. Hank starts the movie off dating this guy, Eddie. He's a guy who works for a performing group and makes a lot of music that we hear in the movies, and we see them perform. And he gets the girls into a show to act. During one of these performances, Jock, literally just named Jock, a known playboy, becomes infatuated with Queenie and begins to take her on dates, which causes Eddie and Hank to become concerned because Jock isn't going to marry her. This is another example of the times being very different, Even myself, I've been kind of dating around recently, just seeing what's out there, not putting too much pressure on anything. But back then, if you weren't dating to marry, what the fuck are you doing? So the conflict in this one, maybe that's why I found it as boring, because it just doesn't hit. Okay, they're dating and they might not get married. That's, who gives a shit? But we move on. Eddie ends up confessing his love to Queenie, who doesn't want Hank to be hurt, so she rejects him and keeps going out with Jock. Later, when Queenie is going out with Jock again, Eddie and Hank plead for her not to go, but she does anyway. But afterwards, Hank sees how passionately Eddie pleads for her to not go on this date. She realizes Eddie has feelings for her, and she roasts the shit out of him for not going after her, saying that she wouldn't want to marry a man like him, being so cowardice and weak, being stepped over, which was crazy. She's dating this man. It's a very serious relationship between the two, and she's like, "You're not running after my sister?" Gross. I just thought that was crazy. So he runs after Queenie, but as soon as he leaves, we see that Hank is crying because she really does want to marry him. Hank is, I don't know, I'm going to be honest, Hank was kind of all over the place, confusing the hell out of me. I'm not sure. I guess she wants what's best for Eddie, which is dating her own sister, which is crazy. Like, if you're with the sibling, you should not go after the other. I think that's weird, and I think the sibling should be like, no, okay, no, absolutely not. But she wants it anyway, I guess. And then at the party where Jock and Queenie are, Jock kind of starts to force things on Queenie. I don't know if this movie from 1929 was trying to insinuate that Jock was gonna R-word her. I don't want to even say it, but that is how it came across. But then Eddie arrives in time, and Queenie leaves the party with him. And then kind of takes a time jump where Eddie and Queenie come back from their honeymoon. I don't know how big this time jump was. I don't think it was that long. But Eddie and Queenie come back from their honeymoon and catch up with Hank, and things are extremely awkward with Hank and Eddie. And then the movie just ends. This was a weird movie. This is a movie that is just so alienated from today. Like Wings, the love triangle, I'm okay. I think that could still translate today. The girl next door kind of vibe, that still translates today. Everything within the main characters of Wings translated today. The only thing that was really bad was, well, I guess, drunk Jack getting taken advantage of, possibly. And then the one creepy side character that creeped on Mary. But I think everything between the main characters could translate today. This can't. This absolutely cannot translate today. But that's the movie. With our three main protagonists in this one being Eddie, played by Charles King, who's been in over 400 films. An insane number. And it lists him as like the first billing. This really did feel like a trio movie. I felt like each of these main three really were represented in the movie. Wings was more of a duo film between Jack and David, although Mary was represented relatively well. I'll be honest, this one felt more female-led, but I don't know if they were really going to give it its credit like that back in the 20s. But then we have Hank, who's played by Bessie Love, whose acting career spans 7 decades. We just have longevity with these top billing of this cast. And then we have Queenie, played by Anita Page. She was called Blonde, Blue-Eyed Latin, and the girl with the most beautiful face in Hollywood. And that's pretty much her whole shtick in this movie, is that Queenie is just hot, and everybody likes her because she's hot. Very interesting movie. Very interesting movie. My thoughts on this movie was really boring and generic. They had a love triangle, just like Wings did, but they did not do anything unique with that stereotype. The whole relationship stuff in this movie is weird, but Eddie says early on in the movie that Queenie is all grown up now, insinuating that he knew her when she was younger, and he's just immediately in love with her after seeing her grown up. Gross. And then Hank is just immediately okay with him dumping her and going after her sister. Again, gross. That feels... I don't have any brothers, so I can't relate on, like, same gender type of situations between siblings. But I do have 2 sisters, and I could just guarantee that shit would not fly between the 2 of them. Absolutely not. And neither would we even... But it wouldn't even be an issue, because they would both immediately just be like, this guy's fucking weird, right? Let's get him the fuck out of here. So that was weird. This was weird. No sisterhood between these sisters. Now, I think a lot of movies were made to showcase talent back in the day, like different Broadway plays or actors and stuff like that. So I think this movie was just that. So we're just going to move on. I think it was just to showcase them, and I think that's all I can think. So we're going to move on to the superlatives of this movie. My favorite character in this movie is genuinely a lighting guy. Like a character who's a lighting guy for the Broadway play, not some extra, not some technician who accidentally ends up on screen. An actual lighting guy within the movie who openly admits to wanting to kill a man.
Over here! Say, do I get that spot or don't I? That's tough, I missed him.
Now, my least favorite character is Jock. I'm convinced he was going to R-word Queenie. And he's the villain in the movie, portraying him so. It's like, so they're not glorifying it. I can give it that much credit. It's very much like what he's doing is wrong. And, you got to be careful when you showcase true evils of the world. And they are, painting it as evil. So they're not glorifying it, but I hate him for it, regardless. My favorite moment, there's just a scene where everyone that's working on this Broadway play is just openly hateful to each other. and talks of killing one another in a very serious manner that I found pretty hilarious.
Are you back again?
Yes, and I'm telling you how I want my music played.
I've conducted opera. What do you know about music?
Nothing. I only wrote it, that's all.
Then you have the best of me. You don't have to listen to it.
Well, I'll tell Zenny what a sap he was for buying it. Maybe he'll get you to write the music for the show.
If I couldn't do better than this...
If you could, you wouldn't be waving a stick.
Electrician, a little more this way with that spotlight. What are you trying to do, ruin my profile?
Your profile was ruined the day you were born.
That's a smart crack. Hit me with it and keep it here. Say, put that spotlight over here on this girl.
He wants it over there.
Well, it goes over here. That spotlight goes here. I can't sing without a spotlight. Say, you couldn't sing if you had a searchlight.
Was this movie Oscar worthy? Absolutely not. This was not a good movie. The relationships between the characters are completely unrealistic and unbelievable, and the whole time it's just boring. And the music, probably great for the time, but very much not into it now. So I'm going to say no. This movie was not Oscar worthy. All right, Letterboxd segment. I love this segment. Let's get into the reviews for this movie. Auteur gave it 1.5 stars. 100 minutes of forgettable songs and women screaming at each other about men. I know. Those were the motherfucking times. Yeah, this is definitely probably a really good example of misogyny in films. Sometimes I feel like maybe people overblow some stuff, and maybe that's just not the case with some of these movies that they accuse that of. But oh my God, it's just you can't. It's unrefutable that this movie is entirely that. Well, let's see this one. Sam Meltzer, 2 stars. An actual quote from this movie. I've never taken my clothes off in my life. Great illustration of the prudeness that they show these women. And, like, nothing wrong with being a little more conservative. Not being as out there sexually. But to take it to this extreme, I think it's probably a little crazy. But I do support, being modest is completely fine. But being unrealistic of it is ridiculous. Here we go. Thorkel August Olderson with a dime. An absolutely beautiful review here. Do you need an inspiration to commit suicide? Look no further. This film will rob you of almost any desire to live. I'm not giving it the lowest score possible because it does have some nice music, and it is of historical interest, and because I'm an exceptionally kind man. You gotta love people who say that about themselves. I have a problem with films that make jokes of people that stutter. Okay, I actually don't agree with that. There is a character in here that stutters. It's the Hank and Queenie's uncle. I don't felt that he was ever made, like he himself was made fun of. There was some humor with the stutter of him trying to say one sentence, giving up on it, and saying it a different way. I didn't see that as disrespectful to people who stutter. I don't stutter, so I can't speak to that. People want to let me know if you've seen the movie and have a stutter. If you want to let me know how you feel about the representation in this movie, go ahead and belittle women. He says, I don't know if I feel that the women themselves were actually belittled. It was just very weird dynamics between women. There was a lack of sisterhood there, seemingly lack of respect for each other, but not the actual women themselves being belittled. And then he says, this does both. It has a silly story, bad acting, and very bad camera work. This is bad, and not in a good way. Yeah, I agree. I usually, I can enjoy bad films. Morbius, I did enjoy Morbius because it was bad, but this is just in a weird area of just being bad and just absolutely no interest in it. I have now seen every film that has ever won an Oscar as best film, and this is the worst of them. What were they smoking when they gave the Oscar to this turd? I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know how it got the Oscar. I just saw Wings, and Wings was an older film. It was a silent film, and it was better than this, so I know that movies were better at this time. Don't know how this one won Best Picture. Let's see. Tony gave it 1 star. A pretty significant milestone in the history of film, given that it was the first sound film to win Best Picture at the Oscars. But other than that, there's really not much to appreciate. probably my least favorite Best Picture winner I've seen so far, and I've seen Crash. A little teaser for something to come in this series. I've never seen Crash, so we'll see if I feel the same way this man does. But let's keep going. Sarah993 gave it 2.5 stars. Maybe the Broadway melody of 29 was innovative back in the day when sound technology was fully utilized. After all, this was the first Hollywood musical to win Best Picture, showing what sound can accomplish during the time period. But time has been hard on this film. Today, the Broadway melody is nothing more than a historical artifact. The story is just your typical I want to be famous narrative, and the sound technology, albeit impressive for the time, is primitive and obsolete. Yeah, technology didn't age well, unlike Wings, where I think the technology actually did age well for it. Yeah, this was just not a good movie, but I would feel disingenuous if I only read bad reviews, so I do have one good review from this movie. Jessica gave it 5 stars. Jessica, I'm going to assume this is a woman. That's probably interesting to note, given probably my biggest criticism of this movie is the representation of the women in it. But she said, it's been a while since I've watched this film, and I'm so happy. It's as delightful as I found it the first time. I'm a sucker for pre-code about showgirls, and this one doesn't disappoint. Bessie Love is talented and fiery, and I love her character, Hank. I would say good performance from her for the most part, but bad character. Anita Page looks beautiful, especially with that long blonde wig, and she is fantastic as her character Queenie navigates her new star status. No wonder this film won the award for Best Picture. The one downside to this film is that they play the title song about 60 billion times, and it gets old pretty quick. I've let my feelings be known about this movie. I disagree with pretty much everything they said, but I do feel that it is fair to show the other side of somebody who did enjoy this film, albeit I disagree entirely. But now, this segment here is going to be where I just kind of take a look through the whole decade, compare the different movies, pick out my best performances, favorites, just different superlatives from the decade. This one only has 2 movies within this decade, so this segment will be more interesting going down the line. But for now, let's get into it. The best Oscar winner of the 1920s was Wings. The worst Oscar winner of the 1920s was Broadway Melody. I've gone into that very much in depth. My favorite character from all these movies was David. I loved just this introverted, more sensitive guy in a war setting, that loses his life after doing some incredible things to survive. Was heartbreaking. David from Wings is easily my favorite character. My least favorite character is, I'm going to go with Jock from Broadway Melody. Pretty sure he was down to commit some sexual assault, which is never okay. Honorable mention being the creepy military police from Wings. Similar things, but maybe more harassment than assault. My favorite scene is Jack and David's final goodbye. I really felt that friendship to see them say goodbye to each other. It really was an emotional moment for me, and I think it did. I think I teared up, but I don't think any fell. But that was definitely my favorite scene, with my least favorite scene being Eddie and Queenie coming back from their honeymoon, meeting up with Hank, because it's just a super awkward scene. I guess they did a good job of showing the awkwardness of it, but it was just not something I want to see again. Now we get out of the 1920s, and we go into the 1930s. So, next decade here, we're going to see how these movies were and how the Oscars were during some of the Great Depression and the beginnings, maybe not in America, but the beginnings of World War II. This will be very interesting to take a look at. Very interesting period of time. From the Roaring '20s to the Great Depression. One of the best decades in history, I guess, given the name of it, to one of the worst. But see you guys next time. Next time is going to have 10 films, so the gap between this one coming out and the next one is probably going to be pretty large. But I got other videos that come up on this channel, so go ahead and check them out. WeVault is a big series that I love to do on this channel. Too Soon, a series where I take a look at shows canceled after one season to see if they were gone too soon. Should be starting soon, starting with Freaks and Geeks. I've seen a couple of episodes of it so far, and honestly, it is really good. It is really good. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Give this video a like so I can keep making more. Please subscribe for all the content I have coming. And as always, keep gaming.